Good evening, everyone. Welcome. The shiur tonight is dedicated to Leilu Nishmat Albert Menir Zichrono Livracha, who was a student of Chacham Ovadia Yosef, the father of Renee Wasserman, and a very special person who was a teacher of the Rambam, and as I said, a student of Chacham Ovadia. And our learning tonight is Leilu Nishmato, Avraham ben Moshe and Flora, Chaim Arukim. So we are beginning this evening our series on Shiurim on Hilchot Pesach, and we are going to be having 3 Shiurim on Hilchot Pesach. Tonight we're going to be discussing common Pesach misconceptions with regards to cleaning the house, with regards to preparation of food, and so on. Next week, Tuesday, same time, will be how to kasher the kitchen and various different utensils, how to kasher them. And then finally, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be going through the Seder, especially this year, the second night being Motzei Shabbat, going through the Seder and discussing the various halachot of the Seder. So tonight, we are beginning with common Pesach misconceptions. And so the first thing I want to discuss tonight is with regards to cleaning and searching the house. This is something which, if you listen carefully, I will save you, I believe, many hours with regards to preparation for Pesach. So the Torah tells us in Parashat Bo, V'lo yira'eh lecha chametz, it's forbidden for chametz to be owned by a person on Pesach. And this is known as the prohibition of Bal Yera'eh or Bal Yimatzeh. These are 2 negative prohibitions in the Torah for a person to own chametz. So that means not only is there a prohibition to eat chametz, of course, which carries with it the punishment of karet, spiritual death, but there is a negative prohibition, 2 negative prohibitions of owning chametz. There's no problem in seeing chametz, the problem is owning chametz. Now, from the Torah's perspective, even if a person has chametz in their home on Pesach, as long as it doesn't belong to them, they have no ownership on it, it's absolutely fine and it's permissible. So from the Torah's perspective, you have from Purim many bottles of whiskey which are pure chametz, and you decide that you are abandoning ownership, you're being mafkir, making it hefker and giving up your property rights on this whiskey. From the Torah's perspective, it's sitting there in your house. It's absolutely fine because you don't own it. It doesn't belong to you. Yes, it's sitting in your house, but it doesn't belong to you. You've given up ownership of it, and therefore, from the Torah's perspective, as long as you don't own chametz, even if it's sitting there in your house, it's absolutely fine. And this is called bitul. As long as a person nullifies in one's heart, or some say you have to actually express it, but a person nullifies and he says, any kal hamira de kal b'shuti, any hametz which I have in my possession, which I know about, which I don't know about, is liftil v'leheve hefker ka'ara, is going to be like hefker. From the Torah's perspective, it does become hefker, it becomes abandoned, and it's permissible for a person to have that hametz in their home. The Chachamim, however, said no, we're not going to allow this. Even if you abandon your ownership on hametz in your house, still you have to get rid of it from your home. And 2 reasons were given why the Chachamim instituted this. One reason given is that you're not going to do it genuinely. Look, if you have hundreds of pounds of chametz in your home, and you say before Pesach, yes, I'm nullifying it, that means that if somebody comes into your home, a non-Jewish person visits you, and he takes a full swipe at all of your whiskey, you can't say anything, and you can't even be upset because it doesn't belong to you. There's nothing to be upset about. Chamim were concerned that a person will say he's mafkir, he's abandoning ownership, but genuinely he's not going to do that. He's not going to do it sincerely. And therefore they said it's not enough just to give up ownership, but get it out of your home. That's one reason given why the Chachamim said it's not enough just to abandon, you have to get rid of it. The second reason they gave is that even if you sincerely give up your ownership rights of it, but it's tempting to have hametz around you in the house. and maybe you'll forget, and you'll eat the hametz, which although it's ownerless, nonetheless you may forget and end up eating that hametz on Pesach. Therefore, to avoid that, you have to get rid of it. So this is why the Hachamim came along and they said it's not enough just to be mafkir, just to abandon ownership. You actually have to get rid of hametz from your property. Now the major question with all of this is when the Hachamim instituted this, what did they say you need to dispose of? So there is one opinion, which is the minority opinion, which is that the Hachamim instituted you get rid of everything. Everything means even crumbs. Even though you could argue that the first argument that it won't be a sincere and genuine nullification doesn't apply, because why would you not sincerely nullify a few crumbs? But according to the second reason that you may be tempted, you can be tempted even something very small. And therefore, the argument is that even if it's less than a kazait, even a few crumbs, even something small, the Hachamim also instituted that you need to get rid of those crumbs. However, the other opinion says, look, both reasons, you don't need to check for less than a kazait. When the Hachamim said that you have to get rid of hametz, they meant only a kazait. A kazait, we'll talk about in a moment how much that is. But you have to get rid of something substantial. Why? Because we're not concerned you're not going to sincerely give up your ownership if it's something less than a kazait. And secondly, we're not concerned you're going to be tempted to eat if it's something less than a kazait. So these are two opinions, and there's a huge difference between these two opinions. The difference being is, according to the former opinion, you have to dispose from your home all hametz, including crumbs. According to the latter opinion, you don't have to dispose of crumbs. All you are looking for is pieces of hametz. Now, what does pieces of chametz mean? What does a kazait of chametz mean? Kazait in Torah normally means 27 grams. So we say you need to eat a kazait of matzah on Pesach night. We say it's 27 grams normally. It depends on the circumstance, but normally 27. However, there are different ranges what a kazait is, and therefore we would say anything above 17, 18 grams would already enter that, perhaps even less. The point is, it's certainly not crumbs. It's something significant, a small piece of bread, for argument's sake. Something like that is what we're looking for. Now, who does the halakha follow? Remember, we're talking about a rabbinic mitzvah here. Because as we said, biblically, as long as a person nullifies it in their heart, that's sufficient. So that's important to remember that we're talking about a rabbinic mitzvah here to dispose of hametz. And says Hacham Ovadia, and many other poskim as well. Since this is a mahloket in a rabbinic mitzvah, and the logic follows the second opinion that we're not going to be concerned that a person's going to want to eat less than a kazait, and he's not going to not be sincere when he gives up his ownership right in something less than a kazait. When the Hachamim instituted to get rid of hametz, they instituted only getting rid of a kazait of hametz. And what this means is that when we are doing our Pesach cleaning and searching on Pesach night, the night before Pesach, we are not looking for crumbs. There's no need to look for crumbs. We're not looking for tiny pieces. All we are looking for is a kazait of hametz, pieces of hametz. And even those who are strict and get rid of crumbs, that's only crumbs which are edible, which is there's somewhat of a temptation. If crumbs which are, in between the radiator, something like that, there's no point in checking something like that. It's a waste of time and effort. So this is really important. The Sfaradim and even for Ashkenazim as well, it seems that the halakha is that one is looking for a kazait of bread, and that's all we need to be searching for when we are, and that's including before Pesach as well. The one exception to this is if one is going to be using that place on Pesach in conjunction with food or with the preparation of food. So, for example, your table where you're eating from, or the kitchen in which you are cooking and baking food in, then you do need to get rid of the crumbs. That's not because of the prohibition of owning hametz, because as we said, that's only owning a kazait of hametz. It's because of the prohibition of eating hametz, because there's food here and there are crumbs. Those crumbs may get mixed in. Okay, so then you need to really look for crumbs. In the kitchen, yes, you're looking for crumbs. On the dining room table, you're looking for crumbs and you get rid of all the crumbs. Correct. But everywhere else in the house, you don't need that. All you're looking for is pieces of hametz, which is why bedikat hametz outside of the kitchen should not be taking more than an hour or two. I mean, entire preparation, unless you've got little kids with toys, with lots of this, okay, fine, that's something else. But for a regular family, we don't have little babies and toddlers running around the house. It shouldn't take more than an hour or so to clean the entire house, to check the entire house. Yeah, okay, the kitchen may take a bit longer. But that's really important. If you want to do spring cleaning, fine, that's fantastic. But don't blame it on Pesach and come to Pesach anxious, tired, stressed from doing things which are not necessary to do. And I say this every year, and it's really important because if people recognize this, it would make their lives much easier in preparing for Pesach. As I said, if there are places which are going to be used in conjunction with food, that needs to be checked. And you have to get rid of crumbs as well. But apart from that, you are looking for pieces of hametz around the house. Furthermore, where do you need to check? So this is clear in the Shulchan Aruch that you only need to check places where hametz is brought in during the year. If you have a place where you would never bring hametz in there during the year, that doesn't need to be checked at all. It doesn't need to be cleaned at all. So for example, there's no need to clean the bathroom cupboards because that's not a place where people bring food in. The Shulchan Aruch gives the example of storehouses of wine, where you would just store bottles and barrels of wine there. You don't need to check that because people don't bring chametz there. Your shed, who would bring chametz into your shed? That doesn't need to be checked. If, however, during the year you brought chametz, you would need to check. So if sometimes during the year you eat in your bedroom, then fine, that needs to be checked your bedroom. But if you have a strict policy in the house that no chametz goes up or goes into the bedrooms, those bedrooms don't need to be checked at all. The one exception to this, which the poskim write, is that if there are young children in the house, if there are toddlers in the house who are not of the age of responsibility, then indeed you do need to check everywhere, toilets, bathrooms, everywhere. The reason being is because the Gemara says that children are like mice. The mice can take hametz around, and children can do that as well. They can end up with hametz anywhere around the house. And so even though you have a policy that you don't bring chametz up into the house, the reality is chametz does end up. And so all of these places where kids go, then yeah. But important point is only where the kids can reach. So if in your bedroom you have a policy you don't bring food in, okay, so there are kids around, so you have to check the floor. Okay, but there's no need to check the cupboards, up in the cupboards, to check if there's chametz there or not, because you would never bring chametz there, and your kids couldn't reach that. So there's no point in checking that. You don't need to clean that at all. You don't need to look in it. But as I said, any place where chametz is brought into does need to be checked. And something which I think is overlooked, which people don't know about, is with regards to one's garden. Do you need to do bedikat hametz? Do you need to actually check your garden for hametz? Yeah. Do people here check their gardens for hametz? Halakha, you need to. If you have picnics in the garden, or you have food in the garden, then it certainly needs to be checked. Again, we're not looking for crumbs. Again, this takes 5 minutes. You walk around the garden on the night of the day of Pesach, or before Pesach, and you check: is there any chametz there? Is there any pieces of chametz? Did you maybe a few weeks ago throw out some pieces of bread to the birds? If you go around the garden, there's nothing there. You move on. That's it. And that should be the whole house. The whole house should be like that. You're looking for a few pieces around the house, and that's it. When it comes to the kitchen, you spend a bit longer. The car as well. I need to check the car because the car is commonly a place where we eat in. So it needs to be checked to ensure there's no hametz there. Do you need to check your pockets? So again, this depends. If a person knows, I never put food in my suit, I never put food in my dress, whatever it may be, then you don't need to check that, because again, the same principle. If we don't bring hametz into it, you don't need to check it. If, however, sometimes you put food in, then you do need to check your pockets. And if you put food in your pockets regularly, then you need to check your pockets for crumbs, by the way. This is why it's written that one checks their pockets for crumbs. That's only for people who put food in their pockets regularly. Then there's a problem. Maybe they left hametz during the year, and maybe they're going to put food in the pockets on Pesach, and that will mix with the crumbs of hametz, and you'll come to eat it and it'll be asur. Yeah. you're not checking your pockets for crumbs because of the prohibition of owning chametz, because as we said, it doesn't apply to less than a kazayit. We're checking your pockets because you may come to eat chametz only if you're a person who puts food in their pockets. If you never, most of us will never put food unwrapped in our pockets. Adults, at least. Kids will. That's why you have to check the kids' pockets. But adults don't need to do that, because we don't put uncovered food in our pockets. There's no need to check our pockets. Books. Does one need to go through books and ensure there's no hametz in the books? Again, same principle. As long as you're not going to be using the book whilst eating your soup on Pesach, then that's fine. Because even if there are crumbs in your books, which you've studied with during the year, you've read during the year, you've been eating food on it whilst you're reading or studying it, fine, there are crumbs there, that's nullified. The only problem is if you're going to be reading those books in conjunction with food over Pesach, then indeed that does need to be checked for crumbs. Which is why we advise don't use the same books for Birkat Hamazon, which you use during the year for Pesach, because those crumbs may end up on your food. So that's why we don't use the same books. If the books are not being used in conjunction with food, then absolutely that does not need to be checked for Pesach. Now, I'll take questions in a couple of minutes. Now, we've been talking about the mitzvah of disposing of hametz, which, although we said from the Torah it's sufficient to just do nullification, Hachamim said get rid of the hametz, do bi'ur hametz. Now, on top of that, the Hachamim said on the night before Pesach, we do something called bedikat hametz. We check the house in order to dispose of the hametz the following day. Now, this mitzvah of bedikat hametz is, of course, rabbinic in nature, and they instituted this at the night. Now, the poskim write the reason they didn't institute this during the day is because people are busy during the day, and also at night you can have the focus of the flame, and you can do it more precisely, behind sofas, behind things, to look for places where hametz is brought, to look for the pieces of hametz. So that's why they instituted it at night time. And it should be done at the beginning of the night, the bedikat hametz, before sitting down to eat. And in the first instance, it should be done from nightfall, which here in London would be in a couple of weeks, about 8:45. However, that may be difficult for some people. So one can start already from sunset, which is 8 p.m. 8 p.m. is sunset. If there's young kids who want to take part in it as well, then one could really start. It's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and as we know, rabbinic mitzvot we normally allow to be done from sunset. And so therefore, if a person needs to, he may do bedikat hametz already from sunset. Now, the Hachamim was so particular about this that they said if he didn't do it at nighttime, do it during the day, the next day. And if for whatever reason you didn't do it during the day, a person was ill the day before Pesach, the night that he was ill, wasn't able to do it, and he comes to Pesach, you still have to do bedikat hametz, even on Pesach itself, even on Chol HaMoed. As long as there is a few hours left of Pesach, this could be on the 8th day of Pesach, right to the end you realize, I forgot to do bedikat hametz this year. You have to do in the middle of the 8th day, bedikat hametz, check there's no chametz in the house, and nullify it. So much so, the Hachamim even said, if you didn't do bedikat hametz before Pesach, you didn't do bedikat hametz the whole of Pesach, and now Pesach is finished, you still have to do bedikat hametz. Why? What would you be doing bedikat hametz for? The reason being is because there's a halacha, hametz sha'avar alav Pesach asur b'hana'ah, which means chametz which a person owned over Pesach, it's forbidden to have benefit from that for eternity. You can't even give it to your animals. It has to be destroyed. So if a person didn't do bedikat hametz before or during Pesach, the Chachamim were concerned that perhaps he owned chametz during the course of Pesach, and that chametz is then asur b'hana'ah, it's forbidden to have benefit from it at all. And therefore they said, even after Pesach is finished, you didn't do Bidika, check your house to see there was no Hametz there, to ensure that you won't end up eating Hametz of which you owned during the course of Pesach. So this underscores how important this mitzvah Bedikat Hametz is, but again, doesn't need to take that long. Now, after we do Bedikat Hametz, we do Bi'ur Hametz the next day. Now, Bi'ur Chametz means to dispose of Hametz. Now, again, people think that Bi'ur Chametz means burning the Hametz. It's not the word Bi'ur means. The word Bi'ur, according to the main halacha and the Tanna Kama in the Mishnah, is disposing of, meaning you get rid of it, you destroy it, you crush it into, you crush the bread into pieces, you throw it away somewhere in a bin. Something like that, where you get rid of it, you're disposing of it out of your possession, that's considered biur. One opinion, and that's the opinion of the Ashkenazim, who they followed, is to burn it, which is why you see people burning the hametz. But really, it's not necessary karadin to burn the hametz for Sfaradim. Ashkenazim have the minhag to burn, but for Sfaradim, it's sufficient just to dispose of it outside of one's property, or to make it inedible, either by crushing it or by pouring chemicals over it so it's no longer edible, something like that, where a person clearly shows he's disposing of it. Now, what's very interesting is the blessing of Bedikat Hametz, the mitzvah Bedikat Hametz, which we do in the night. This is going to be Thursday night. The blessing is Asher Kiddishan Tzivanu al Bi'ur Hametz. It's not al Bedikat Hametz. The blessing, if you ever noticed that, it's called the mitzvah Bedikat Chametz, but the blessing which we say is not Bedikat Chametz, it's al Bi'ur Chametz, on the disposal of Chametz. And the Rishonim explain that this is the beginning of a process which will continue tomorrow when we get rid of the Chametz. The Chachamim didn't institute a blessing for nullification because that's Devarim Shebalev. It's something which is in your heart, whether you nullify something or not. That they wouldn't make a blessing for. But an act of searching, that they made a blessing for. But because the main purpose of searching is to dispose of the next day, therefore they made the beracha al bi'ur chametz, to dispose of chametz. And this is important, and I'll tell you why this is important. There is a minhag, which many have, it's our minhag, that we put pieces of chametz around the house. Now, the first one to mention this minhag is the Ra'avad, Rabbi Avraham ben David from 12th century Provence, the Ra'avad, and he writes about this custom. He says, "Minhag nashimhu." It's a minhag of the unlearned. He says, what's the point of putting these pieces around the house? What do you need to do this for? The mitzvah isn't to find hametz. We don't say bracha sheikh al mitziat hametz, to find hametz. The mitzvah is to search and then to dispose. If you search, you didn't find anything, you've still done the mitzvah. Because there were some who were saying, look, if I search the house and I don't find any hametz, then it's going to be a blessing in vain. Because I made a blessing to find hametz, I didn't find any hametz. But that's wrong, says the Ravad, because the mitzvah is not to find chametz. The mitzvah is to search and then to dispose of what you have found. If you don't find anything, fantastic. You've still done the mitzvah which the Hachamim instituted. Similarly, it's recorded that the son of the Hacham Tzvi, the Hacham Tzvi was Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Ashkenazi, his name was. He was the rabbi in Amsterdam in late 17th, early 18th century. He had a lot of influence in the Spanish and Portuguese community in London at the time. And his son, the Ya'avetz, writes that his father, La'ag, he would mock those who would do this minhag. He was really against it. What's the point of this? Nonetheless, it's our minhag, and we do it. We put pieces around. The idea of putting 10 pieces around comes from the Arizal. The Arizal talks about 10 pieces specifically, and that's the idea why we have specifically 10, which is why the Middle Eastern Sfaradim took this on. But there's two things to remember, which are important with regards to this. Firstly, and unfortunately you see this, is that don't turn the mitzvah b'dikat hametz into finding 10 pieces. That kills the whole purpose. Yeah, we're not trying to look for 10 pieces during the night of Bedikat Chametz. What we're trying to do is find Chametz. It happens to be we put out some pieces as well that we look for at the same time. But it's not the purpose of the search. The purpose of the search isn't to find the 10. Sometimes you put aside these 10 pieces and the whole night is about finding these 10 pieces. That defeats the whole purpose. The purpose is to do bedikat hametz and to, at the same time, you find these pieces. That's point number one. Point number two is that when putting these pieces, one should not be putting one should not be putting a kazayit or more. One should be putting very small pieces of hametz around the house. Why? Because, unfortunately, this happens year in, year out. Someone forgets where these 10 pieces are. Now you find 9, and you're looking around, and there's one piece missing. Now what are you going to do? You're going to have to start turning the whole house around. In fact, for a fact there's a 10th piece of hametz here. But according to what we've learned earlier, that we are searching for what? We are searching for a kazait of hametz. That means if you put aside pieces less than a kazait, then even if you ended up losing one of those pieces, fine. As we said, you don't need to search for pieces less than a kazait. So even if you forgot one of those pieces of hametz, if it's less than a kazait, then you can just do the nullification in your heart, and that would suffice. So that's important to recognize when we do the preparation for the bedikah, that we are not putting big pieces, just small pieces around the house. One final point with regards to all of this is that any place which has been thoroughly checked for hametz before the night of bedikat hametz, i.e., a bedroom is where you bring in hametz during the year, and you the week before Pesach you've cleaned that properly, and since then you know for a fact no hametz has gone in. That doesn't need to be checked at all during the night of bedikat hametz. Bedikat hametz is for places of the house which have not been checked before Pesach or have been checked, but Pesach has since gone in. Any part of the house which has been checked in advance and no hametz has gone in since does not need to be gone around during the night of bedikat hametz. So to summarize what we have discussed so far with regards to the mitzvah of cleaning the house for Pesach, we need to recognize that the mitzvah of searching for hametz is a rabbinic mitzvah, because biblically one can nullify. And halakha is that we are searching for pieces of chametz, not crumbs of chametz. And you only need to check places where chametz is brought in during the year. If chametz is not brought in, it does not need to be checked unless there are children around. You need to check your garden, you need to check your car. You don't need to go through crumbs in the books, as we've explained. You don't need to go through your pockets if you don't put food in your pockets. And that's the mitzvah of disposing of the hametz. The Chachamim instituted the mitzvah of checking for the hametz in order to dispose of it the following day. The checking is done at nighttime, although if you didn't do it at nighttime, you do it all the way through Pesach and even after Pesach. And the blessing which we say is bi'ur chametz, because the purpose of searching is to dispose of. Disposing means for Sfaradim just getting rid of it, not necessarily burning it. And finally, the minhag of putting pieces around the house is an established minhag which we do. One must make sure to put small pieces of pieces around the house, and secondly, one doesn't turn the mitzvah bedikat hametz into just searching for those pieces and not more than that. Okay, are there any questions on this? Any questions so far? Feel free to unmute. No, all good. Okay. Fine. So I hope that's saved us a lot of time. As I said, people often want to do some extra cleaning. That's lovely, but one shouldn't think this is a religious obligation and halachic obligation to do so. And like this, a person can come into Pesach much more relaxed and calm. So that's saving us time. Now let's talk about saving us some money. And here we'll talk about hechsherim on various things. So I talked about this last year, but I feel it's so important to talk about each year, especially because, as we know, food prices are going up, there's inflation, and not everyone can easily, unfortunately, provide for Pesach. That's the reality, is that people do struggle. And I think this year more than other years, people will struggle. And therefore, it's important to recognize what is required halachically for a person to buy with a hechsher on Pesach, what does not need a hechsher on Pesach. And the principle is very simple. Principle is that on Pesach, we know that a drop of chametz which falls into food, the entire food becomes prohibited. Unlike all other mixtures, kosher and non-kosher, we know that as long as it's a 60th, it becomes nullified. On Pesach, a drop of chametz which falls in becomes nullified. Now, this applies only on Pesach itself. Before Pesach, if now one is cooking food tonight for Pesach in their Pesach pots, and one of the kids accidentally drops in a tiny drop of chametz, brushes their clothes onto the food, and it gets mixed in, you can no longer take it out. That food, because there's more than 60 times of those crumbs of chametz, becomes nullified, and you're allowed to eat that food. You're allowed to eat that food even on Pesach itself. And we Sfaradim hold that the chametz, which was nullified tonight, does not reawaken 2-3 weeks later on Pesach itself. That's point number one we need to be aware of. Point number two we need to be aware of is that there's another principle, generally speaking, in the laws of kashrut, and generally speaking in Torah, which means we don't assume things go wrong unless they are wrong, unless you see them going wrong. So the Shulchan Aruch gives the example of meat, cheese, and fish, which was salted before Pesach, i.e. they're being preserved. And they were set aside for Pesach. You weren't careful to ensure that no one came near it with hametz. You know, in some houses, there's a special room with the Pesach food, and if you dare to go near it without brushing your clothes down, you get in trouble. So this didn't happen in this house. They put aside the Pesach food, and no one bothered to ensure that no one would come near it. So you don't know if anyone's come near it or not. The halakha is you're allowed to have that food. Because we're not mahaziki sur, we don't assume that things went wrong there. Bearing all of this in mind, Chacham Ovadia writes that lots of things do not need the hechsher for Pesach. So I'll give you a radical example. Chacham Ovadia writes. He says, say you had a barrel of wine set aside for Pesach. You're having a whole bunch of hosts for Pesach, guests. You're hosting a whole bunch of guests for Pesach, and you've poured all your wine into a few barrels of wine, big barrels, hundreds and thousands of pounds, perhaps. And one of the kids is walking past, and he throws his lunch into this barrel. This is before Pesach. He throws his sandwich into the wine. Problem, no? There's going to be even if you take the sandwich out, there's going to be a crumb of chametz. Chacham Ovadia says, very simple: strain the wine, so there's no pieces left. You got rid of everything possible. Strain it. There will be pieces there, but that's fine because it's before Pesach. It's nullified 1 in 60, and thus it's permissible to use that wine for the 4 cups of wine. You can use that wine for the mitzvah of the 4 cups of wine on Pesach. Remarkable. Based on this, anything which is completely natural, any food product which has natural ingredients in it, and it's bought before Pesach, that is allowed to be consumed on Pesach without a hechsher. So the examples, common examples, is of course water, salt, sugar, tea, pure tea. I mean, not any additives to the tea. Pure tea, pure coffee, pure oil, 100% juices. These are all, Chacham Ovadia explicitly writes about these things, that they do not need a hechsher. Now, the reason why you will find hechsherim on all of these things is because the Ashkenazim don't hold of what I said earlier. They say that the prohibition reawakens on Pesach. It's hozer v'neor, which means that even if it was nullified before Pesach, these crumbs, but because of the stringency of Pesach, when Pesach comes, then these crumbs become reawakened and they become prohibited. And so for them, they indeed do need a hechsher on lots of these things. And the kashrut market, the reality is the market run by Ashkenazim. That's the reality how things are. And therefore, they provide always according to the level of the Ashkenazim. And so for them, this is why they put hechsherim on things such as water. They put hechsherim on things such as apple juice. Pure apple juice doesn't need hechsher. If it's pure apple, it's 100% apple juice. So that's really important. That can save a lot of money. All these kinds of things, you can use regular oil, regular salt, regular sugar. In fact, Chacham Ovadia himself writes, he said they would go to the marketplace and they would buy dried fruit. I'm not talking about fruit, dried fruit. So they would buy, because what's the problem? Even if something fell in, it would be nitbatel, it would be nullified before Pesach. So anything, to repeat, anything which has pure ingredients in it, natural pure ingredients in it, and is not obviously chametz, i.e., it's not one of the five. It's not one of the five grains which are forbidden to be chametz on Pesach. That may be bought on before Pesach without hechsher. The reason I say to buy it before Pesach is because if it's bought on Pesach, let's say on Chol HaMoed, and there is a possibility that that food was manufactured on Pesach itself, and the nullification took place on Pesach itself. Perhaps it was manufactured on day one, and it got to the shopping to the shop the next day, and you're buying it on Chol HaMoed the third day. So there's a possibility that it was manufactured and the nullification took place on Pesach, and that doesn't work. This is why, as long as you buy it before Pesach, these things do not need hechsher. Of course, one wants to be mahmir, and one has the money to be mahmir. Fantastic. Of course, you'll find poskim who will tell you it's good to be mahmir and so on and so forth. But the reality is, not everyone has spare money to be able to spend on these stringencies. And very often, when a person is stringent in one thing, it ends up being lenient in another thing. You find this in the Gemara. When you're stringent in one thing, you end up being lenient in something else. So it's wonderful that you're strict about this and you buy everything with hechsher, including your plates. Fantastic. But what does that end up with other things? Are we as strict when it comes to charity? Are we as strict when it comes to other things? So one needs to think balanced. One needs to recognize that yes, it's good to be mahmir if one has the financial capacity to do so, but to recognize it's chametz. It's a chumrah to do so. So the question being asked there is, should you wait after Pesach to buy these things again in case they were nullified on Pesach? Should you wait after Pesach to buy these things again? Correct. You shouldn't buy them on Pesach. Either you buy them before Pesach or you buy them after Pesach. Oh, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, no, it's a great question. Okay, the question being asked is, what happens if you bought something, you buy a packet of sugar or salt the day after Pesach, and you keep that till next year Pesach? Now, perhaps that was manufactured on Pesach. And nullification doesn't work on Pesach. The answer is, as soon as Pesach finishes, nullification will kick in. You understand, Daniel? The second Pesach finishes, nullification will kick in. And then we don't say next year Pesach, it will reawaken. So that's why all of these things do not need a hechsher. And I repeat, because it's important to understand this, and hopefully to save a bit of money this year.
Could I ask a question about vitamin C, because it's used as a preservative?
I'm going to come to vitamins. Esther, I'm going to come to vitamins shortly. Okay, so please just hang on.
As preservatives.
What in foods you mean?
It's in fresh fruit juices, and it's I think it's also in frozen vegetables.
Look, I would have to check. I can't answer that. I can't answer that now. But I would have to check each one individually. But I'm talking now about pure things, which are pure orange juice, pure apple juice. Extra things, you have to check each one and make sure that there isn't chametz in it. The question being asked here is it from buying or the manufacturing is the bitur? So that's a good question. And from my understanding, from what I've discussed with others as well, is that it's from the manufacturing. When the things get mixed together, it's a reality, it's a mitziyut. When the things get mixed together, that creates nullification, even if the Jew doesn't buy it till later on. That's my understanding. Even if you want to say it's from the buying, which some have argued it's from the buying, still, as long as you bought it before Pesach, it's fine. So that's why we say we should buy it before Pesach. Spices, 100% pure spices, cinnamon things, saffron strands, all absolutely fine to buy without a hechsher. Okay. Same with instant coffee, Ruth. Same with instant coffee. Let me just say a couple more things, and we'll open up for questions or more general questions. But let me just talk about tablets and medications, because again, this is something which comes up every year. It's important to refresh our memory with this. The Rambam clearly writes that anything where there is no satisfaction to the palate doesn't fall under the prohibition of Hametz. So anything, based on this, anything which is has no taste or has a bad taste does not fall under the prohibition of Hametz and may be consumed on Pesach. The reason being is as follows. Food, we know that the criteria for knowing whether food is forbidden on Pesach or not is whether it's ra'ui la'achilat kelev, whether a dog can consume it. Anything which is inedible, that's not considered something which is prohibited on Hametz. However, there is an idea brought in the Shulchan Aruch, which is even something which is not edible for a dog, if a human being for whatever reason decides to consume it, then achshaveh, he's made it important, and on a rabbinic level it's prohibited. On a rabbinic level it's prohibited to eat something even which isn't fitting for a dog, but if a human being eats that and it's got hametz in it, it's prohibited. Now the argument put forward by some is that these tablets and these vitamins and these medications which people take, even though they're not ra'u la'achilat kelev, nonetheless, a person does end up eating it. And they do sometimes put within it hametz. And it could be that, but the fact you are taking it, you are being achshaveh, you are making it important and prominent in your eyes, and therefore it should become prohibited. This again, Chacham Vadia rejects. He says, because you're not giving importance to the hametz element within it. You are care about the tablet itself, about the medication itself, whatever it may be. You don't really care about the hametz ingredient in it. And therefore, the halakha is that one may take all kinds of tablets, all kinds of medications, especially if a person is unwell, even not seriously unwell, just unwell, etc. Chacham Vadia says if you've only got a headache, something very small, then don't take something which you know for sure has hametz in it. He writes that today, vast majority of medications don't have hametz, and therefore you can assume it doesn't have. If you know, you look at the ingredients and you know it's got hametz in it, okay, fine, then don't take it if you only got something very slight. But anything beyond that, person's ill in bed, with flu, etc., you take regular medication, doesn't need to check if there's hametz in it or not. Even if there's hametz in it, it's absolutely fine to ingest and to consume. And Moshe Feinstein went even further, and Moshe Feinstein said that even vitamins which you're not taking to get rid of any pain or to get rid of any medical condition, vitamins, because they have no taste, that you are allowed to ingest them on Pesach. So the only exception to this, which we should be aware of, is flavored medication. So this is particularly relevant with kids. So kids, of course, will have kalpa, will have all kinds of stuff which they intentionally put a taste in it to make it palatable for the kids to consume. So those things, because there is a flavor and because there is hana'ah lahech, there is an enjoyment to the throat. Something like that does need to be checked. It has no hametz in it because there is flavor to it. So that's why these kinds of things one needs to check. One needs to check kalpa. But paracetamol, which has no flavor, you're just ingesting a tablet. These things can be taken on Pesach for the reasons which we've explained. Using this same argument with toothpaste as well, you could argue that toothpaste has a taste to it, and they do intentionally put a nice flavor to it. So your breath smells nice and it tastes good for you whilst you're brushing your teeth. So this is why some poskim do say that you should have a hechsher for toothpaste. Others argue that no, you've got no interest in the hametz element of the toothpaste. Although it may have hametz in it, you've got no interest in it. That's why some are lenient with toothpaste. Yeah, I can understand those who wish to buy toothpaste with a hechsher because it's going in your mouth and because it has a good taste. Arguably, that would need a hechsher. That's why some people do have a hechsher for that. But otherwise, things such as lipstick, other cosmetics do not need to be checked whether they have hametz in perfumes, etc. They do not need to be checked whether these are simply not ra'ui la'achilat kelev. They're not fitting for the consumption of a dog, and furthermore, you're not ingesting them. Yeah, so there was one who wanted to argue that because you're anointing it on yourself, you're spreading it on yourself, it's like tzicha ka'achila. It's got the same status as eating. We don't hold of that, and therefore all these kinds of things which are not being done to eat or to consume, even lipstick which is going on your lips, and it's possible you'll consume something, but you're not doing it to eat. Therefore, there's no achshaveh there. There's no chance of you considering that prominent. That does not need to be checked for hametz on Pesach. So to summarize, and then I'll say one more thing, and then I'll open for questions. To summarize what we've said with regards to hechsher in the second part, we've said that anything which is pure and natural for Sfaradim does not need a hechsher as long as it was bought in advance of Pesach. We've also explained that tablets and medications may be consumed for anyone who's a bit unwell. The person just has a very slight headache. Some would say it's better not to take something, but if one wanted to, one would have plenty to rely on to take on. One even has what to rely on to take vitamins, on pure vitamins on Pesach. And as we've said, cosmetics are all fine, do not need any hechsher, don't need to be checked for hametz, and some would argue it's good to have a hechsher for toothpaste because of the flavor, and so similarly, any syrup, any medication which has a taste to it does also need to be checked for it's got no hametz in it. Final point I'll say is with regards to kitniot. Chacham Ben Zion said this. So Chacham Ben Zion Abashol said this about 30, 40 years ago. He said he found the minhag of Ashkenazim not having kitniot very ironic. Because kitniot is not chametz. Chametz is only something which is made from the 5 grains of wheat, barley, spelt, oat, and rye. Anything else cannot be hametz. And anyone who tells you that kitniot is hametz is wrong. A minhag evolved in the 13th century amongst the European Ashkenazim, and evolved in the 13th century. That because many reasons are given, but one of the reasons is because they were commonly mixed together, the grains of wheat with the grains of beans and these kinds of things. Ban all these kinds of legumes and beans. Fine. And that's why Ashkenazim don't have kitniot, and even some Sfaradim don't have kitniot. However, what's important to understand is that we don't go over the top of this. And Chacham Ben Zion Abashol used to say, since people are so particular not to have anything with a drop of kitniot in it, or a derivative of kitniot, etc., etc. The reality is, what's the most likely thing to have hametz in it on Pesach? What's the food most likely to have hametz in it?
Matzah.
100%. Matzah is the most likely food you're going to eat on Pesach, statistically wise, to have hametz in it. Because the reality is, we're relying on hechsherim when we buy, but unfortunately, there will be cases where the timing went wrong, it went over 18 minutes, water was added into the wheat flour, a bit of water, and it was unknown. Things go wrong when baking matzah. If you ever bake matzah, you'll see it's a very tight job to get everything running time, and very often you have to throw away pieces of matzah because it goes over time or because water fell in, etc., etc. So that's why matzah really has a strong chance of there being hametz in it. And people who don't have anything over the course of Pesach, they only have matzah, yatzah scharo be'efsedah. Is that worth doing that? Because the whole purpose of not eating kitniot is that we don't end up having hametz. But if you're not eating nothing else apart from a matzah, then you need to be aware of that. Then it's not always a great idea. So why am I saying this? Is to recognize that kitniot is not real hametz, which is why Ashkenazim can freely eat. Even Ashkenazim who do not eat kitniot can freely eat in the house of Sfaradim. And this is a common question every year. This happens. Baruch Hashem, we live in a society where we all live together. There's been an ingathering of exiles, and you have people who are eating together. Not to speak about those who are married together, from different customs, different traditions. Even if you're just eating at someone's house, and you don't have to decline an invitation because they're Sfaradim and you Ashkenazi have kitniot, it's absolutely fine. The food can be cooked in a kitniot pot. You can be having your food being served to you in a pot in which kitniot was cooked 24 hours before. That's absolutely fine because it's not real hametz, and therefore Ashkenazim don't eat kitniot, but they can have the parts of the what's been expelled from the pot whilst making the non-kitniot food. They're allowed to eat that. That's absolutely fine. So we should be aware of that. And of course, an Ashkenazi woman married to a Sephardi woman, a man can eat kitniot and doesn't need to atat darim. Chacham Ovadia has a discussion for another time to go into. Is of the opinion that those who were brought up with the minhag of not having kitniot and then got married have the right to abolish that minhag, do atat darim, and continue from the beginning of their marriage not like that. Okay, that's a discussion for another time, how exactly that works. I'm not saying that in the halakha, I'm just bringing that to your attention if it's relevant, but that's interesting as well. Okay, so that's tonight's shiur. We've discussed misconceptions with regards to cleaning the house and how important it is not to put effort and time into things which we don't halachically need to do. Secondly, we've talked about what kinds of food need to have hechsher, what doesn't need hechsher. We talked about vitamins, tablets, medications, and cosmetics, etc. And finally, we've discussed as well with regards to kitniot. Next week, we'll, Bezrat Hashem, be talking about hag'alat kelim, how to kasher utensils in advance of Pesach. And 2 weeks' time, we will discuss the exact seder. We'll go through the seder night and go through each part and try to understand each part of the seder. Okay, we'll open up for the last 5 minutes for any questions. So, I assume you need to use new cosmetics for Pesach, not ones you use during the year. Why do you say that? Definitely not creams.
Things like lipsticks.
Just look at it. Look at the lipsticks. Look at the stick. If there crumbs on it, then you put it away. If there aren't crumbs on it, then you use it, or you just take off one layer on the top. Yeah, I don't think you would need to. Buy new ones.
Yeah.
Please, can I ask about hana'a, asur b'hana'a? iPhone, I'm not sure what that question is. You're welcome to ask. Can you buy milk from the supermarket? So, of course, there's the regular issues during the year of.
And just as. And just when you made the distinction between things which were, chametz and actually eating, but isn't there an issue also of enjoyment? So it's not just, it's not just whether it gives it a taste or something like that.
Sorry, what are you talking about?
The issue of hana'a, of some of the examples that you gave didn't. There could be also.
Do you want to lie down? Yeah.
Okay, the line's breaking up. So next question: can you buy milk from the supermarkets? So look, you have the regular issue throughout the year of buying Chalav Israel and not Chalav Israel. Okay, so I'm assuming that this person. Everyone, if you don't want to stay on mute to the end, talking about someone who buys non-Chalav Israel throughout the year, then yes, a person would be allowed to buy that in advance of Pesach. In advance of Pesach, you'd be allowed to buy that. As I said, in advance, not during Pesach itself, but in advance of Pesach, you'd be allowed to buy that. Correct. Next question. What's instant coffee? Yes, as long as it's pure instant coffee, it's fine. Non-flavored instant coffee, it's fine. Is Rabbi Yosef giving the ruling for Israel worldwide? Worldwide, I'll send the sources afterwards. The person has asked for sources. Okay, why can't you assume that if you ate in the garden, any residue would have been eaten by a bird or mouse or become inedible? Because what? You mean if it was a long, long time ago? Yeah, you can assume that if the last time you ate there was in the summer of last year, correct. But if you ate there a couple of weeks ago, then yes, you would need to check it. It's written clearly in halakha that you need to check the gardens. You're right. If the last time you ate in the garden or anyone brought fruit to the garden was last year's summer, which is highly likely if you were living in England, then I would agree with that. You would need to check the garden. But in places like Israel, then when fruit's coming in and out all the time, then yes, I think you would need to check that. Okay, fine. Lovely. Thank you everyone for joining. Bezat Hashem, we will resume next week, same time, Tuesday night, 8 o'clock. Have a wonderful evening.
Beginning with selling hametz.
What, with regards to what, Francis?
There are people who sell their whiskey or their hametz food during Pesach somehow. I've never understood it.
You mean before Pesach, they said, not on Pesach?
Yeah, before Pesach, you sell things so that you don't own them anymore. How do you do that?
How do you do that? You do it by completing the form and handing it to the rabbi, who then sells it to the non-Jew. Are you asking how technically does it work? What's the legal way? What's the legal mechanics of it?
Form and legally, how does it work?
Okay, please God, I will address that at the beginning of next year. It's more than a 1 minute answer.
Thank you very much.
Just see, yeah, it's something which has certainly developed over the last few hundred years because of the fact that we store food so much nowadays. But please God, it needs a detailed answer. Please God, we'll discuss it at the beginning of next week. Okay, fantastic. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Laila Tov, great to see you all. See you next week.
Very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Sally.
I find your computer very difficult. Some of the keys are blurred.
Simon, do you want to say hi?